It started without any grand media circus, without cable news countdowns or breaking banners. Just a quiet motion filed in a Washington, D.C. district court. Barron Trump versus Jasmine Crockett, a defamation suit. Simple on paper but carrying the weight of generational reputation. For Barron, this wasn't just about a stray comment made by a sitting congresswoman. It was about control, about image, about ensuring that the only Trump untainted by scandal stayed that way. Until that point, he had largely remained a silent figure on the national stage, keeping his name clean while others in his family dominated headlines. But Jasmine's leaked remarks, the ones that hinted he'd used a political fund tied to the Trump family for overseas ventures, struck a nerve. Asterisk, no one saw it coming, especially not from Jasmine Crockett. She had made a name for herself in the House as a sharp, unfiltered Democrat from Texas, known for her strong presence during committee hearings and her pointed language when it came to accountability. When the leaks surfaced, critics assumed she'd been reckless, possibly too bold, but she didn't walk it back. She didn't even blink. Instead, she welcomed the lawsuit with an unwavering calm that suggested she had no intention of folding, and possibly something more. Asterisk, Barron's legal team came prepared with a full arsenal. Their approach was meticulous. They relied on tone, painting him as a private citizen wrongfully dragged into political theater. He wasn't a politician, they said. He wasn't his father, and more importantly, he had never directly commented on PACs, overseas money, or any political activities. They were betting on the public's memory, hoping people would see Barron as he'd always been framed, the quiet one, the one spared. Asterisk, the courtroom sessions were, at first, dry. Motions, rebuttals, clarifications, nothing flashy. Most of the media didn't even send crews inside. It was presumed to be a legal cleanup job, a quick court scolding for Crockett, a symbolic settlement, maybe a retraction. Nothing to see here, but Jasmine played a different game. She sat silently through most of the proceedings, only speaking when directly questioned, leaving her attorneys to build her position methodically. They didn't deny that she made the comment. They simply asked the court to let them prove it wasn't unfounded. That changed everything, because by doing so, they opened the door to something neither Barron nor his team expected. Discovery? Asterisk, it was during that phase that her legal team introduced their witness list. It was short, just 3 names. 2 were familiar. 1 wasn't. Jonas Ledbetter. No one knew who he was. He hadn't appeared in any articles, he wasn't on social media, he hadn't been in Washington circles or Trump-related investigations. Just a line on paper. Former intern at Castellan Group Luxembourg. Asterisk, Barron's attorneys objected to his relevance. The judge overruled them. Jasmine's team remained silent, waiting. They didn't leak, they didn't stir up press. They let the pressure simmer under the surface. By the time the trial reached the moment Jonas was called to the stand, most people still assumed the case would end in a quiet dismissal or mutual agreement. But that wasn't what Jasmine was after. Asterisk, Barron Trump, watching from across the courtroom, didn't flinch when Jonas walked in. Why would he? He had no idea what was coming. Asterisk, the truth is, Barron underestimated her, underestimated the seriousness of her claim, and more importantly, the depth of her preparation. He may have assumed she was just another political figure looking to score points by poking the Trump brand. But this wasn't a political move. This was a legal trap set with precision, one that took advantage of Barron's own decision to take the matter public through the courts. Asterisk, by initiating the suit, he believed he could force a retraction, but in doing so, he forced the records open. He created a platform that allowed Jasmine to present what she never would have been allowed to reveal otherwise. That's what made the case so remarkable. It wasn't a publicity stunt. It was a calculated risk, and one that completely changed the story. Asterisk, Barron Trump thought this was just a quiet lawsuit, but it became something far louder. Jasmine Crockett didn't need to raise her voice to make an impact. Throughout the case, while much of the media attention remained fixated on the Trump name and the lawsuit itself, she kept her strategy quiet, deliberate, and far more lethal than most realized. It wasn't about theatrics. She wasn't chasing headlines. In fact, her restraint in interviews and refusal to speak in vague soundbites gave the impression that she wasn't interested in scoring political points. But behind the scenes, she was building something airtight. Something Barron Trump's team didn't expect. A counteroffensive based not on rhetoric, but on verifiable, bulletproof facts. Asterisk, when Barron filed the lawsuit, the initial public sentiment was that Jasmine had overstepped. His attorneys characterized her as reckless, a politician using her platform to take aim at a private citizen. It was a framing that worked well in the early days. Barron's image as the soft-spoken, quiet Trump played well in the public imagination. He had never run for office, never taken to Truth Social with rage posts, and rarely spoke in public. He was, as his lawyers insisted, a young man simply trying to build a life outside his family's legacy. Asterisk, but Jasmine didn't buy that narrative, not publicly, and certainly not privately. She had spent enough time in political committee rooms to know how networks of influence operated, and she wasn't about to back down because of a well-crafted image. Her initial reaction to the lawsuit was calm, measured. and void of defensiveness. She didn't deny the comment she had made behind closed doors, the one that sparked the entire case. She stood by it. And when pressed by reporters, she responded with something rare in politics. Let's wait until everything comes out. Asterisk everything. That was the word that hung in the air, unnoticed by most. But Jasmine's legal team understood exactly what she meant. Asterisk, her plan from the beginning was never to fight the claim on technicalities. She wanted to go straight through it, to the heart of the matter. And she understood something else Barron's team didn't. The lawsuit opened the door to discovery. That meant evidence. That meant access. That meant Jasmine could ask the questions she wouldn't otherwise be allowed to ask, and present the answers in a court that demanded truth, not spin. Asterisk, her legal team moved with surgical precision. They quietly requested financial logs, communication, records, travel histories. They traced the names of shell companies tied to the Luxembourg equity group and noted connections to known Trump-affiliated funds. All the while, Jasmine never appeared flustered. She wasn't interested in fighting a culture war or using the courtroom as a debate stage. She was playing chess. Asterisk, when the witness list was submitted and included the name Jonas Ledbetter, even those paying attention dismissed it. A no-name former intern didn't seem like a threat to a Trump family member backed by high-powered attorneys. But Jasmine knew better. She had personally spoken to Jonas multiple times, vetted him, cross-checked his employment history, confirmed the data he carried, and ensured it couldn't be discredited. She didn't just prepare him, she fortified him. Asterisk. The decision to withhold the explosive evidence Jonas carried until the exact right moment was no accident. Jasmine understood timing. She didn't preview it in interviews. She didn't leak teasers to the press. She let the courtroom be the only place the truth was revealed. Not Twitter, not cable TV. That kind of discipline isn't common in modern politics. But it's what allowed the impact of Jonas's statement to land like a lightning strike. 9 seconds of audio was all it took to unravel the image Barron had so carefully cultivated. Asterisk, that wasn't luck. That was planning. Jasmine had calculated that Barron, by suing her, had taken a gamble, one based on the assumption she had no real evidence, and by staying quiet, by never reacting emotionally, she let him walk deeper into the trap. His lawsuit wasn't just about defending his reputation. It became the very thing that shattered it. Asterisk, Barron Trump entered the courtroom with the assumption he had control, that she would either fold or be exposed as reckless. But Jasmine Crockett didn't play that way. She stayed grounded, confident in her facts, and unmoved by the pressure surrounding the Trump name. In the end, she didn't need to raise her voice, she just needed the truth, and she knew exactly when and how to deliver it. Jonas Ledbetter was not the kind of witness anyone expected to change the course of a high-profile legal battle. He was quiet, unassuming, dressed plainly in a navy suit with no visible confidence in the spotlight. No cameras followed him when he entered the courthouse. Reporters didn't swarm to get his name, but for Jasmine Crockett and her legal team, he was the piece they had been holding back, the one that could dismantle everything Barron Trump's team had built around his carefully protected image. Asterisk, before the trial, Barron had successfully crafted a persona that felt detached from the machinery of Trump. Unlike his siblings or his father, Barron rarely made statements. He stayed out of politics, at least publicly. He wasn't tweeting or hosting rallies. He was building his own life, or so it seemed, one that kept the Trump name relevant without being inflammatory. That distance worked in his favor when he sued Jasmine Crockett. It allowed his legal team to argue that he was a private figure wrongfully attacked by a sitting congresswoman making unfounded claims. Asterisk. The first few days of trial seemed to lean in his direction. Jasmine's team stayed quiet, offering little drama. They didn't rebut emotionally or create distractions. They just waited. And then came Jonas. Asterisk. He was sworn in late in the afternoon on a Tuesday. A few people in the gallery glanced up, more out of boredom than curiosity. When Jasmine's attorney asked Jonas to state his previous employment, he simply answered, intern, Castellan Equity Group, Luxembourg, 2023. A few heads in the courtroom tilted slightly, but no immediate reaction followed. Asterisk, then came the drive. Asterisk. Jonas reached into his coat and pulled out a slim USB stick, handing it to the court clerk with a look that said nothing. No pride, no nerves. The clerk handed it to the judge's assistant, who loaded it into the court system. Jasmine's lawyer made a brief statement. We are presenting audio evidence recovered from internal communications. Dated October 2023. Asterisk. The audio began. The room remained still. The first few seconds were unremarkable. Then, Barron's voice, unmistakable, clear as day. My dad's name opens these doors. I just need the pack to shift funds under the shell cap. Asterisk. 9 seconds. That's all it took. And yet, those 9 seconds weren't just sound, they were collapse. Barron Trump's credibility, his legal argument, and the entire foundation of his claim against Jasmine evaporated in real time. The courtroom didn't explode. There was no shouting, just silence. The kind that signals everyone understands exactly what they just heard. Asterisk. Jonas had brought with him more than just a quote. He carried confirmation. The digital logs on the drive showed not only the audio, but also metadata linking Barron directly to a series of private conversations about political funds and overseas accounts. It didn't matter whether the actions were technically illegal. What mattered was that he had denied any involvement at all. And now the court and the world had heard otherwise. Barron, seated at the plaintiff's table, stared forward. He didn't react visibly, but his legal team's posture shifted. Pens stopped moving. Laptops were closed. There were no objections, no requests to strike the audio, just silence. Jonas's role was brief. He answered a few verification questions, clarified dates, confirmed how he came into possession of the files. He didn't embellish. He didn't grandstand. He didn't need to. His voice was steady, his statements measured. The power of his testimony wasn't in his delivery, it was in the content. What Jasmine Crockett had done was quietly devastating. She had waited for the exact moment when the court and Barron's team had fully committed to their version of the truth. And then she placed Jonas on the stand to unravel it with clinical precision. It wasn't a performance, it was a presentation of facts. And in those 9 seconds, every narrative Barron had spent years building that he was uninvolved, apolitical, detached, crumbled. The press didn't waste time. Clips of the audio hit every major platform within an hour. Analysts scrambled to adjust their framing. Commentators who had spent weeks defending Barron's quiet professionalism were now caught revising their takes. The legacy he was trying to preserve had been turned on its head, not by a smear campaign or political attack, but by the sound of his own voice. Jonas stepped down. Jasmine didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She knew this moment wasn't about winning in a traditional sense. It was about clarity, about bringing forward something undeniable. And in the span of 9 seconds, her witness did just that. For most of his life, Barron Trump was the quiet figure in the background. While his father dominated headlines and his older siblings engaged in political combat, Barron maintained an almost sacred distance. He rarely appeared in interviews, made no controversial statements, and never took the stage as a political operative. This silence worked in his favor, insulating him from the scandals that seemed to orbit the Trump name. It made him seem different, untouched. For many, Barron became a symbol of what the Trump legacy could have been if stripped of its noise and fury. But in the courtroom, during a case he initiated himself, that image didn't just crack, it shattered completely. The lawsuit against Jasmine Crockett wasn't just a legal maneuver. It was a strategic attempt to protect that crafted narrative. Barron had spent years quietly building credibility as a young professional, stepping out of his father's shadow. He invested in tech, explored global markets, and positioned himself as a modern, non-combative Trump, one focused on legacy through achievement, not controversy. When Jasmine hinted that he may have used Trump-connected PAC funds to grease the wheels of foreign investments, his response wasn't to ignore it. He went on the offensive, filing a defamation suit that, in theory, would protect his name and future. But that lawsuit became the very thing that brought the truth to light. From the beginning, Jasmine Crockett handled the case with restraint. She didn't engage in media battles or try to escalate the drama. She remained composed, firm in her decision not to retract what she said. Her legal team, meanwhile, moved carefully, pulling together evidence with the kind of methodical patience that signaled they knew more than they let on. For Barron, that silence may have felt like weakness, but it was anything but. When Jonas Ledbetter, the former intern at Castellan Group, came forward with the USB drive and its explosive contents, the illusion of Barron's detachment from the Trump legacy was instantly obliterated. In 9 seconds, the courtroom, and soon after, the entire nation heard Barron's voice clearly reference using his father's name to gain access and requesting PAC fund movement through a shell account. It wasn't necessarily illegal, but it was damning, especially because he had denied, under oath, ever having such conversations. The moment that audio played, something unspoken shifted. Barron, who had up until that moment enjoyed the benefit of the doubt, was suddenly exposed, not just as someone who had potentially misled the court, but as someone who had been participating in the very systems of influence his family was so often criticized for. It wasn't simply about whether funds were shifted, it was about who he claimed to be. His public image. The reserved, composed, seemingly apolitical Trump couldn't survive those 9 seconds of tape. That's all it took. And perhaps the most jarring part was how quickly that collapse occurred. There was no long unraveling, no extended drama. Just a brief clip that pierced through months of legal buildup and years of image management. What made the downfall so shocking wasn't that Barron had done something criminal. It was that he had so meticulously crafted a reputation that relied on being different from the rest of his family, and in a matter of seconds, that difference disappeared. The voice on that recording didn't sound like a bystander. It sounded like someone who knew exactly how power worked and how to use it. After that day in court, the narrative around Barron shifted instantly. Analysts no longer spoke of him as the neutral Trump. Commentators stopped framing him as the heir who had broken the mold. Instead, he was now seen as just another figure shaped by privilege and proximity to power, not necessarily more corrupt than anyone else in the Trump circle, but certainly no more innocent. That subtle distinction, the loss of presumed innocence, is what truly shattered his legacy. At asterisk, by choosing to sue Jasmine Crockett, Barron made a calculated gamble. He believed the courts would validate his version of events and force her into silence, but instead, the case offered Jasmine a legal pathway to present hard evidence. And when she did, it didn't just win her the case. It demolished the core of Barron as a public persona. It proved that beneath the quiet and polish, he wasn't as separate from the Trump machine as many had hoped or believed. Asterisk, and once that truth was out, there was no going back. In the end, what began as a quiet legal dispute became a defining moment in the public lives of two very different figures. Barron Trump, once the most enigmatic member of his family, had managed to maintain a sense of distance from the political chaos that surrounded the Trump brand. For years, that distance worked. It protected him. It allowed people, even critics of his father, to view him as neutral, perhaps even above the fray. But the courtroom doesn't care about perception. It deals in evidence, in testimony, in truth. And when the truth came out, it erased the protective layer he had spent years cultivating. Asterisk, by suing Jasmine Crockett, Barron opened the door to something far greater than a legal verdict. He invited scrutiny. He demanded an answer to a question many never thought to ask. Was he truly uninvolved, or simply quiet about how involved he really was? That question was answered not through partisan attacks or media spin, but through his own voice, captured on a recording, making a request that directly contradicted his sworn statements. It wasn't a mistake, it was exposure. Asterisk, Jasmine Crockett, on the other hand, proved something far deeper than her political strength. She demonstrated what restraint, discipline, and truth can achieve when used with precision. She didn't weaponize the moment for instant political gain. She didn't scream across airwaves or try to dominate headlines. She simply waited for her opportunity, let the facts speak louder than any accusation, and trusted the legal process to do what it was designed to do, reveal what's real. Asterisk, her approach was not only smart, it was rare. In a climate where performance often overshadows principle, Jasmine chose patience over provocation. That choice reshaped the courtroom dynamic. Instead of becoming the defendant in a defamation circus, she became the anchor of credibility. She didn't destroy Barron Trump, he did that himself. By choosing to place his carefully constructed image in the path of provable facts, asterisk, the fallout was immediate, but the deeper consequence may take longer to settle. For Barron, the lawsuit was supposed to reinforce a clean legacy, one that distanced him from family controversy and positioned him for a future of influence without baggage. But now, that future is unclear, not because of one legal loss, but because of a credibility rupture that can't be smoothed over with PR or polished statements. Once the mask slips, it doesn't go back on the same way. Asterisk, this case wasn't just about politics. It was about the weight of truth, and what happens when someone gambles their entire public identity on silence, only to have that silence broken by their own words. Barron Trump walked into court trying to protect a legacy.